when we can't even imagine a violation of trust, we have this fantasy, and then it's like we go from way up high to way down low, and we don't know how to recover.
Welcome to Season 3 of Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations, with your host, Executive Leadership Coach and CEO of the Granger Network, Kari Granger, and me, Paul Adams, CEO of Sound Financial Group. This season focuses on trust. This is episode 36, The Limitations of Unconditional Trust.
Welcome back to Leadership Impact. This is our season 3, all about trust, and this is our second episode in which I want to dash all of our fantasies about unconditional trust.
What?
Yeah, I mean, this episode, I hope you feel like just totally breaks apart your notion of your belief in unconditional trust and how great that is. Because in fact, Paul, it's quite limiting.
So maybe just to tackle this at the start, I'm sure some of the people listening could be sitting there like, yeah, but I trust my partner in business unconditionally, or I trust this person unconditionally, or trust my spouse unconditionally. Mm-hmm. So how can it go badly to unconditionally trust my business partner, let's say? Yeah,
well, and I recommend everybody read Solomon and Flora's book on building trust in business, politics, relationship, and life. And we're going to pull on that a bit during this episode. If your trust is based in the unthinking, unreflective, general default acceptance of trust until you betray me, then once betrayed, once a violation of trust happens, that's it. There's no recovery. Game over. There's an utter absence of responsibility on your part as a trustor.
Well, and I can see that because when you see people say, I trust, it becomes the other person's fault that the trust was betrayed. And therefore, how I fix this is get that other person out of my life.
Yeah, it's devastating. You can't recover from it. You know, and so many people, and Solomon and Flores call this simple trust, you know, where we just kind of take for granted the trust is there. You know, it's actually an inattention, a blindness to the dynamics that form the basis of our trust. It's like trust until proven guilty.
Yes. Well, and I listen to people talk about trust, and it's almost like the spectrum consists of 2 data points. I am trusting people unconditionally, or I'm suspicious.
Yeah, one or the other. It's not like you can be conditional and calculated in your trust, which people, you know, who have this fantasy about trust may listen to that like, ooh, that's so bad. But, you know, you think about it. Do humans make mistakes, Paul?
This one does.
Yeah. Are humans fallible?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, how often do you think in the course of your lifetime you will be betrayed or your trust will be violated by another person?
More times than we can count.
Yeah. You know, so it's like when we can't imagine that trust can fall apart in a particular relationship, when we can't even imagine a violation of trust, we have this fantasy, and then it's like we go from way up high to way down low, and we don't know how to recover. So rather, let's just recognize people make mistakes. And sometimes they don't even mean to make mistakes more often than not. So how could we actually reorient ourselves towards trust to, rather than expecting nothing to happen, actually being prepared to deal with evidence of a violation or betrayal? You know, so you're not naive about it, but we just know, like, look, Paul, between you and me, I know there's a possibility that you can violate my trust. Why? Because you're fallible. I'm fallible. I interpret things because I'm a human. So whether you mean to or not, you know, there's a likelihood that even though it hasn't happened thus far, it could. But here's where authentic trust comes in. Okay? Authentic trust comes in when I know there's a possibility of a betrayal and I have confidence that you and I can work through it. So there's a possibility that you may betray my trust, and yet I'm choosing to trust you anyway. And I have a confidence that when confronted by a violation, you and me can work through that.
That is a totally different situation than trust falls as a part of a leadership workshop. Or like, we're just going to blindly trust that these people are going to catch me.
Yeah.
Great YouTube videos online, failed trust falls, if you ever want to spend some time at work doing that on a conference call. But this idea of like knowing that there could be a break and that we can work on it and heal it together.
Now think, how does that shift the way you are in the world? A violation comes at you and you can embrace that evidence. You can absorb it and you can neutralize the impact because you don't make it so freaking significant. I think when people make trust so significant, it limits them so substantially in being able to move powerfully and navigate violations.
Could you give an example of what it looks like, maybe, or maybe feels like from the inside, if it's us making it significant, or what it might look like from the outside when somebody else in our organization is making that trust so significant?
They broke my trust. I can never trust them again. I can't work with them. Don't trust them. You know, John took credit for my idea. Never talk to him again, ever. Versus like, hey, John, you violated my trust there. You took credit for my idea. Let's talk about that. Whoa.
That's a very different thing. And even the way you brought it up,
yeah,
it's not giving up its edge of the wrongdoing.
No.
But it's also not bringing to bear that what we have to deal with the stealing of the idea in this case.
Yeah.
But we're not going to have to just deal with, as I am the moral authority and you did this thing wrong.
Yeah, that's another thing, is when we make trust so moral. Now, so many people betray trust unintentionally. Yeah. And so, you know, where does the assessment of trust happen? In the assessor. Whether I trust you or not actually belongs with me. You know, do I, like from our last episode, right? Do I assess that I can make what's important to me vulnerable to you? Right? But rather, if I develop my skill in being able to build and maintain trust, and I know actually takes considerable effort to build and maintain trust, and I develop my skill in recovering when trust is violated, like I know how to recover. It happens through conversation, and it happens through some, you know, truly some acceptance work on my part, right? But if I make it really significant, I prevent myself from taking effective action because it's of moral significance, and all I'm left to do is be hurt and righteous.
Yes, and no man is more righteous than a righteous man with evidence on his side.
Yeah, exactly, right? So this is not a strike against being vulnerable and trusting. It's not like saying, you know, oh, don't have, you know, when we say unconditional trust is limiting, we're not saying don't make yourself vulnerable. It's actually pointing to an even deeper vulnerability, more profound and stable form of trusting, saying, you know what, Paul, my eyes are wide open here. I know, because you're human and I'm human, we're likely to experience some kind of violation, minor or major. I'm going to side on trust anyway. And I'm going to choose to trust you anyway. And I'm going to put a lot of effort into building and maintaining our trust. And when it's broken, because I know it's likely to happen, I'm going to start taking action to recover that, because that's a very human experience. Betrayals and violations are a very human experience.
So as I'm hearing that, just that orientation on the outset, to me, as I think about this, like, had I thought that way, everybody's fallible, trust could be broken here, and I will work through it with them to restore trust if that happens. If they violate my trust, I am going to be intentional to repair trust. That right there takes a ton of the sting out of the break when it happens, it would seem.
Do I think that can happen in my own company? Absolutely. Like I anticipate it's going to happen. And yet I'm resolving on the side of trust because I know when it happens, we can work it out.
Yes. Because
I have confidence in myself. That gives me so much resilience and power in the world. It's like, what are you going to do to me? Betray my trust? That's happened before. I work through it. Some take longer than others. Bigger betrayals take longer to get through. Or I could make it all significant and be upset and stay in a hole and go in a cave and, for the rest of my life.
Well, let's talk a little bit about somebody's a manager, executive, and we're seeing that trust got broke between two people that are in their direct report or close enough that they have some awareness of both people. And when you said that I could never trust them again, I've heard that from people who've worked within organizations where I've been a leader. I could never trust them again. I'll still work with them, Paul. I'll still work with them. I'll do it. But I will never trust them again. It's like, as a leader, what's something you could do that it will at least start to unwind that for somebody on your team? Of course, everybody listening, be sure to forward this podcast to them and have them listen to it and then go have a cup of coffee talking about it. But if you can't get them to listen to this podcast, how could you begin to help one of those team members or peers talk to another team member or peer where you're noticing their trust is broken between one another?
Yeah, good. And just to go back on one thing, it's not going to be good if one decides to continue to work and never trust the other because their actions will limit the results that are possible.
Yes.
Okay, so, we've dealt with this a number of times, actually. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I'll tell you what makes the difference is that both parties have a commitment to restore trust, a commitment and an interest to restore trust. So, we've, from time to time, we're asked to come in and help facilitate, mediate, negotiate these kinds of conversations. And when it doesn't work, it's because one of the parties is not committed to restoring trust. So the first thing you want to do is you want to identify, we have a trust issue here. It's either two-way or it's one-way, but I need to know, are you willing to have the tough conversations and work through this? And are you open to the possibility that trust can be restored? Now, if you live your life in simple trust, that possibility does not exist for you. Trust is not something that can be restored. But if I have two people, my first step is to work with them until they're open to just the possibility that trust could be restored.
Which that's not at all that's not the language I've ever used as a leader, I've ever heard used. The language I hear is, you need to go talk to them.
Right.
Or somebody comes and complains to you about somebody breaking trust, you go, well, our ethic as a culture is you need to go talk to them.
Yeah.
I'll never trust them again. There's no need for me to talk to them. I'll still work, whatever. It's like, but just that pause. I mean, that seems to do so much, that question, Kari. It removes them out of the situation of the betrayal and opens them to a possibility. Almost, you'd probably be able to speak to this better, but it's almost like you trigger curiosity in them.
Yes.
Like, is there a way? Do you see how it's possible? Are you willing? And it's the commitment and the interest.
Yes.
To be able to do it. Because some people could be committed that they want to trust everybody in their life, but they have no interest in doing it with that person.
Right. Yeah. Do they even see that that's a possibility, and are they interested in? 100%. Now, it might be a condition of continued employment. I'm not willing to have people on my team that don't trust each other. And in fact, I have a number of occasions said, okay, do you need my support in speaking with this person? Sometimes they do. Or would you like to handle this yourself? But either way, we're not going to continue with this relationship being a distrustful one because it erodes our culture and limits our possibilities. So, you have to ensure that they're open to that possibility. And then, I'd say getting their commitment for the long haul. It may not, if it's a small thing, it could happen in one conversation, but it may need multiple conversations, and then how you enter that conversation matters, right? So we're going to be curious in the way in which we enter the conversation. There's a difference between the things that happened and what those things meant to me, right? So
I love the way you put that. There are the things that happened, and then there are what the things that happened meant to me. Did I say it right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I really like that.
Yeah. When you did not back me up in the meeting, to me, that meant, that you were siding with them, or you left me out to hang, or, I can't trust you to back me up anymore. To be on my side. I don't know. It could mean a whole bunch of things, and that's when things can get revealed. Oh, wow. I did not speak up in the meeting. It didn't mean I didn't back you up. Like it meant that to you. What it meant to me was I was letting you shine.
Yeah.
You just have no idea, So, but look, if I'm not willing to resolve our break of trust, if I'm not willing to restore trust, then whatever you say, I'm not going to take I'm just not going to take it. I'm going to say that's false, right? So it matters more so how people enter the conversation, I think, than the content of the conversation itself.
That makes a lot of sense. And that ability for somebody in a leadership role to have the reconnection not be, you guys need to talk about this. You guys need to sort it out. But being able to say, the two of you need to figure out how you're going to trust each other. That's the standard for this organization. And you guys need to go talk about how you're going to restore trust, which is a totally different conversation than to hash out whatever the topic that was the problem was going to get rehashed.
Right. Yeah. Very, very good. And you can give them this season.
Yeah. Just this whole season. Just listen to every episode this season before our coffee next week, Wednesday at 10.
Yeah, Paul, there's so much more to go into here, but, we just don't have the time. So I think, the big takeaway here is actually decreasing the significance we put on unconditional or simple trust, to stop living in a fantasy like it's just there. It doesn't need to be built and rebuilt. Trust is something that is likely to be broken and can be restored. And this can immensely enhance our power and resilience if we can develop more capacity on how to restore trust, a little bit less on how to judge trust.
How often are we just judging the trust in others and not restoring trust? So this has been I don't say this about every episode anymore, but this is a great one, Kari, and I think a gift to our audience, that idea of what is it we're going to do to work with and restore trust instead of walking around and judging who is trustworthy. Almost like an emperor with a wand, and you are trustworthy and you are trustworthy. And we do that all the time, not realizing that we're taking away our ability to produce trust in our own lives and in the future of those people with whom we have relationships. And I even go all the way back to my spouse and the ability, little things. Then, like, hey, Paul, the last 6 months you said you would wash the car. You haven't been washing the car. Instead of just start getting the car washed, have a conversation about restoring trust that I could get that car washed or get that trash out or get little things like that and what that would mean to do in an organization. So thank you for this, Kari. For all of you listening, think about that ahead of time in awareness that trust will be broken and that you can be committed to restore and produce trust in the future in those relationships when that happens, and of giving yourself the opportunity to be the actor, to use your agency, things within your auspice about how to trust others and how to restore trust. And from the Granger Network, from Kari and from me, we hope that this episode has been a contribution to your leadership impact. Thank you for tuning into Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. Subscribe now at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.